All right, for this, let's take a look at our animation again, and we'll add one more piece that I think will drive people crazy. Oh, what did I do here? Okay, right now I took out the stars because I'm going to do that in another tip, but this is basically what I'm at. I have a sun that goes up in the sky. And now I'm thinking to myself, and again, this is beyond what the minimum requirements, but if it's driving you crazy that you want that sun to come back, then you might want to know how to control that. So right now, if you think about it, the center point of that circle is moving, and it just keeps moving, and it can go into the negatives, and it's perfectly happy to be in the negatives. There's nothing that tells the code, you know, hey, I only want you to be on the screen, unless we actually tell it to. So it doesn't care. It's giving it a negative value. That's fine with it. It can track negative values, but it can't draw them on the screen, obviously. First of all, if I wanted to slow that sun down, like you might think, oh, one pixel at a time is the slowest I can go. No, you can do fractions, which basically means every 4 draw cycles it would move 1 pixel, right? So that's what going less than 1 would be. Every 10 draw cycles it would move 1 pixel, so you could get really, really tiny, slow things. You could also speed it up quite a bit, and you could just say like, woo, okay, there's the sun. Um, so this number here, if you view this number as something that is changeable or variable, then that could change. So, let's make that into a variable. And in fact, let's call that variable sundir. You can see here I added it to my global list already because I was cheating. Um, and so, well, why did I just call it direction? Well, the reason I called it direction is because I'm going to think of this variable as something that can change while the program runs, and it's going to tell it what direction to go. So let's just say I start it at 0.5. Now let's just say 1. So my direction is 1. So what's going to happen here? Well, my y value is going to subtract 1 every time, which means it's going to go up, right? Because 0 is at the top. So if we're subtracting, we're going closer to 0. Starts at 250 and goes up. I'm going to change this now to a plus. Why am I going to do that? Because I want to, so which means if I run it now, it's going down. Well, obviously I don't want the sun to go down below the mountains, but it's easier to, in my head, still, kind of do math, because here's what I can do. Instead of calling this a 1, I can call this a -1. So I'm going to add a negative rather than subtract a positive, right? Same difference. Um, I just like when I'm doing this, because of what I'm about to do, I like to think of it as a plus because it's just a little bit easier. But now that we have this as a variable, we have a little bit more control over it because we can change it. So watch this. If my sun y is less than 0, then I want my sun direction to equal the negative value of sun direction. So if it starts at a -1, when it hits 0, it's going to become a +1. And if it was a +1, when it hits 0, it's going to become a -1. So it goes up, and remember, it's the center of the circle that it's tracking. So when the center of the circle got to 0, it changed the direction, and now it's going downward, which means we didn't tell it to ever stop going positive, which means it's going to disappear off the screen and go down into the floor. So we can do the same thing. We could make a whole nother if statement here. If the sun y goes to a particular, too high, but actually I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to say, or the sun y gets greater than. So what's the maximum value we want? Well, again, my mountains right now are being drawn at 300. I don't want this to go beneath my mountains, so maybe I say 300. So if it's greater than 300, so the same thing happens. It changes direction. All it does is flip the, what would you call that? The charge is what I want to call it anyway. Flip it to positive or negative. So we have it hit there, and then we have it hit, again, it's the center point there. Now, obviously, that still goes beneath the mountains. There's a couple ways you could fix that. We could put water in here so that it's over top of the sun so that you would never see that it goes too far down. But how about at the top when it gets like there? Again, remember that sun Y always refers to the center point of the sun. So I could say, instead of saying sun Y is, less than 0, well, really, the radius is 75, which means it will be off the screen if it ever gets to -75. Or maybe I wanted to go off the screen for a little while longer, so maybe I say go to all the way to -100. And then here, maybe I say go to 225 instead of where I said before. Now that's actually funny because this is higher than 225, which means I think it's going to mess up. Yeah, it's like I can't do that. So this number has to start lower than 225 if I'm not going to have a mess up right away. So let's see. So it goes up and it should go off the screen entirely, and then it will come back down, and it should not get beneath the mountains, right? Now, whether, again, I would just put a lake here and I would let it go beneath the mountains because I think that would look cooler. But so adding a direction, so all you're doing is basically changing the amount that it's moving to a variable, and then the variable is set up here at the top. And of course, it gets into the global so it can change. Now, one other thing, again, remember you can make it go slower. So you can say, oh, I want this nice, slowly rising sun, or I want a nice, extremely slowly rising sun. Now, that would be interesting because now you got this like really subtle movement. Or you could make high-speed cars zooming by and just do this on the left and the right. So instead of changing the sun's Y value, again, if I change the sun's X value and I, start playing around with if the X value gets different, um, I just have to fix this just because of the numbers I chose, I got to make sure I do it right. But I told it to change the X value, so now it's going slowly to the left, and we're not going to sit and wait, but if it gets off the screen to -100, then it would go slowly to the right. And so it would bounce back and forth in this area. So again, you could think of this as a boat or a car. Let's do it. Let's do it fast. And then you get things moving around. So as you change these values, you can get a lot of different effects, which is kind of cool. I'm going to do one more kind of complicated thing with the stars, but I'm going to save that for tip 3. If you just use this idea and did 3 different things that move around on the screen using that, that could probably make a pretty cool painted picture. So the next one is, again, an optional idea, just something I've been thinking about and want to try out.